I'm going to do an introduction because I don't know where in the show this is going to be. Hello, welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. I am the dejected James Jones. I'm joined today by Mr. John Lindemann.
It's great to be here, James.
Is it?
Always.
Mr. Guillaume Veillette.
The still impassable Guillaume Veillette.
Impassable. Ooh. And Mr. Greg Leahy.
Ahoy, everyone.
If you're wondering the dejection in my voice, there's many things that could be the root cause of it, but you don't know this one. You will in a second. We were recording our Mario Kart Direct segment before this, and Audacity decided that instead of doing that, it would let us record it for like 35 minutes and then just absolutely obliterate my audio so that we have no usable audio on my part.
I mean, tonight my oven almost caught fire, so...
That's true.
It's just one of those days.
Technology hates us. You missed out on a few things. John and I re-engineered the My Nintendo app to be a better thing. Mm-hmm. We talked about dogs versus cats extensively. We talked about Conquistadors, which we may still do. Who could say? And because I know Greg was particularly upset at the loss of this during our My Nintendo discussions, John felt the need to give us a screenshot of his Animal Crossing birthday screenshot, and it was
actually.
Yeah, it was a bear that I asked, quote, "Why does he have come fuck me eyes?"
Yeah,
which I stand by.
Well,
I still think that's a valid question.
Yeah, I think it's actually she. It's Charlize from Animal Crossing is in my my feed.
Charlize needs to stop making eyes at me like that. It is not. Yeah. I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I mean,
it's not okay.
You sound like you're checking for it, but hey,
it's dead center in your screenshot, John. Not much I could do to avoid that.
Sure. Yep.
Suffice to say that we tried to make fun of the Nintendo today and somehow made a better version of the app than Nintendo's by accident, which says a lot. It says a lot when J&J Dream Factory tries to do a J&J Dream Factory segment and instead just does a good business segment. But yeah, we'll probably still talk about the Mario Kart Direct, but we're a little dejected right now. At least I am. I'm a lot dejected. Maybe we are at a mean a little dejected, but the extremist amount of dejection is on my part. I don't know. Figure it out. Get your stat nerd. Get your local stat nerd to help you figure it out. But we're going to instead pivot to do something else. And that is our retroactive. So actually, did I say what the episode was? I probably didn't. This is episode 923. It is April 17th, 2025. You're listening to Radio Free Nintendo. You're home for buffoonery and fuck-ups. And also, you're home for the retroactive on Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap. This is our Switch 1 retroactive. Which is to say, a retroactive on a Switch 1 game from the launch year. That was our criteria. Some of you didn't understand this. Some of you did understand this and didn't care. We ended up with a list of nominations, and we as a Ford group narrowed it down, and this was the survivor. And to those of you who did understand the directions, and fuck you too. So yeah. So this is a remake of what did this one originally come out on?
Master System.
Okay. So not shocking that it's not good because it's on the Master System. This is an extremely faithful remake of that game that they then put new graphics and new audio on top of. Well, you could press a button and bring in the old graphics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like there was what is it? R-Type Dimensions, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sounds so right.
That's the first one I remember doing that, where you could just like on the fly switch between old and new graphics, and But maybe it's been done before, like on some PC game or...
In that case, you were talking about polygonal graphics, kind of substituting in for the original arcade, kind of artwork of R-Types 1 and 2 in that case. Here, it's still got more of a kind of, that hand-drawn look and all that, but it has also got some kind of stealthy 3D, actual geometry going on, for areas, to give them more scale and stuff. But obviously, whatever you're doing cosmetically, the fact that you are allowing people to be able to change on the fly rather than it be some sort of discrete mode, it tells you that, it's not just faithful or, it is the same game. Obviously the way the character moves, the enemies move, all that kind of stuff. It has to be the same to be able to do that, right? So that's what you're getting.
Yeah, I think the only disappointment that I had with it from a visual standpoint was that even though you're getting all these cool new weapons and armor, it didn't change the look of your character. That would have been great. You get a new sword and it's actually reflected on your character. That would have been cool.
Well, since we're talking about the visuals immediately, the one thing that I found funny is that Karen at some point was asking me so what was that game that you were playing? It looked kind of bad, and I was like, kind of bad? What are you talking about? And she was like, yeah, it kind of looked like a Flash game, and that kind of blew my mind because I did not know that Karen was the type of person to be like, it looks like a Flash game. I don't know where she picked that up from, but also. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really see it, but also she didn't know the story behind this is a game where, it's an old game with a new coat of paint, and so what she meant was that the animation didn't seem all that great, and I had to show her okay, well, maybe you didn't see me switch between the old and the new graphics, but they've added quite a few frames of animation, especially when your character is turning around. They went from 0 frames of animation for that to several that show the at least the character changing foot to go one direction or the other. And at that point, she was a little bit more impressed with the game. Oh, okay. Once she understood what the game is, but before that, she was not that impressed.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it looked really good. I thought your character was always moving or trying to kind of look realistic. I thought it just looked really alive most of the time.
I can kind of see where it comes from though, because a lot of Flash games, they would have a sprite that was animated that would essentially just slide over the stage, and there is a certain amount of that in how this game looks.
Sure,
not necessarily saying it as a detriment, but just mechanically, because if a lot of 2D games aren't actually 2D games, that's sort of the thing. This is a proper ass 2D game, and so that how they did that and. They probably built it in, I don't know what they would have built it in, but you might have been able to build something similar looking in Flash a little bit, because there is some stuff that looks really good, but yeah, I think more from how it looks like it's moving might be the thing that keyed that in her brain.
Right. And it's not all the backgrounds that fire all cylinders, some of them are, they're all so many steps up from the original where you're lucky sometimes to even say that you've got a background. But
some of them are really kind of notable extrapolations, if you like, you know what I mean? So in some cases, okay, yeah, you've taken the Master System graphics and say, okay, let's add lighting, let's add, another, parallax layer essentially, and all this kind of stuff. And then in other cases, they pretty much just came up with this themselves. There was nothing there before, and they've just come up with all these kind of details and atmospheric touches, pretty much all cloth. So yeah, that is one of the, I did make more of an effort this time, because I had played it before on Switch, but I made more of an effort to kind of play with the old graphics at times this time to have a better appreciation for what they were doing. But I probably intended to play with the old graphics even more, but it was just kind of I just enjoy looking at the other ones more, so I'm going to do that.
Right. Well, the new graphics I find with the added frames of animation showing your character changing direction, I find actually help the maybe James will disagree with me, but like it helps with the gameplay a little bit. You know, like I find that the new animations are a more accurate representation of what's actually going on in terms of like hitboxes and where, you know, in what direction you're going and etc. And they've added several kind of clues that were not in the original for things like hidden doors or like places where you would find secrets. And so like the new graphics also make the game a tiny bit easier to play, or a little bit more modern, even though it, you know, some of us, I guess, I don't want to spoil it, but some of us wish that the game had been more modernized than it was.
It should have been more modernized than it was. It feels like dog shit. It's so bad. The jump is so bad.
Yeah.
The jump is so bad. This is the worst jump in a game released in the last 20 years. This is
okay, maybe, but what about in the last 40 years? Because that's kind of what we're talking about.
But I wasn't born 40 years ago. So there's no how much they did on this game visually. They should have made the jump not dog shit. And let me explain what I mean besides just saying it's bad, although that is sufficient. The arc of the character's jump is, one, not very high. And many things require you essentially hit the full arc of the jump to get there. There are a number of platforms that to get to, you have to hit it at exactly the apex of the jump. What happens if you miss it? Well, if you're just a little bit off, you're going to bounce off the side of the platform and fall into a pit that probably takes you to an area that you don't want to be in right now. Then you're going to have to find your way back to where you were. This can happen multiple times because that same jump is pixel perfect. The other problem is a lot of characters' jump arcs, if you actually like mapped it out over a timeline, you'd find they're very near the apex of their jump for longer than a parabolic motion would say that they should be. That gives the jumps a little bit of a feel of floatiness, but it also gives you something to play with. This character is at the apex of their jump for approximately 1/1000th of a femtosecond.
So, like, in which area of the game was that a big problem?
Yes.
Because I don't.
Yes.
In
all of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Because, like, the only place where I felt that was against boss battles, and when trying to fight those clouds when they're at height, like jumping height level.
Yeah.
But that's about the only time that I was like, oh yeah, this is annoying.
There's a bunch of platforms that you have to go over it's not the lava platform jumps, which also suck, but they suck for a different reason. When you fall into them, you end up underwater. A number of the platform jumps are the exact max height of the jump. And like, there's no reason to do that. There is none reason to do that. You can bring them down a little bit.
I imagine the reason is to, the belief would have been to have some element of challenge, isn't it? That's the thing. You've got to put it in the context of the time, right? This is a game from 1980.
But they didn't. The game's not from 1987. This game's from 2016.
I know, but it was clearly at some point they, you know, were with the developers at Lizard Cube, right? They, in this particular case, they didn't go beyond the design of the original game. As Guillaume said, there's some things with, kind of, doing visual cues and things that they could do in the context of the new graphics to help. But in terms of the mechanics and all that kind of thing, it's just a remake. It's just a kind of remaster, shall we say, really, because sometimes when we talk about remakes, you might be talking about a game that's, similar in theme and characters and stuff, but is essentially a new game, like the new Resident Evil 4 or the new Resident Evil 2 or, whatever. Those are different games from their originals. Whereas, this is essentially just a remaster. And the point is, what Lizard Cube has gone on to do, right? Like stuff like Streets of Rage 4. So that's where it's like, we got new graphics, but we're actually doing a new Streets of Rage as well, right? And presumably the upcoming Shinobi that they're doing is going to be very much the same thing, right? We've got, our graphic style applied to this classic franchise, but we're also doing a new game. It just seems like, I guess maybe they just weren't ready for that at this point in terms of, having to kind of accomplish both things at once in terms of, okay, how do we reimagine this from a visual perspective, but then also have to design a game that feels rooted in its tradition, but is in fact a new game. That's perhaps at this point in their, history was a bit beyond the scope of what they felt that could be done. So, that does have to be kind of remembered in that sense, because like I said, 1989, one of the galling things about this whole kind of there was quite a run of these sorts of games, these kind of, games that were essentially platform action games, but they had, some like RPG mechanics, maybe in there, or, some exploratory elements in there, and a lot of them, I think they had a weakness in that they fell back too much on the kind of established notions of design that came from arcade games, because, arcade games were the kind of pinnacle of the industry at the time, right? They had the best graphics, they, were the flashiest and stuff. And so even when people were making games that were distinctly home video games by nature, they still had these arcadey elements in them. A long, long time ago, we did a retroactive on Zelda 2. And you could say very much the same thing about that, in terms of it has elements in there that just don't belong in a game of that nature, very blatantly when you look back at it now. But back then, even somebody like Nintendo that had already done the first Legend of Zelda, it was very much a home game. It's for the disc system. It's got a save and all this stuff. They still put this kind of arcadey stuff in there. And, it might be, how you save, how you continue, or it might manifest itself in this more mechanical element that you're talking about, where it's like, let's make the jumps more precise. You really have to get it correct to traverse the landscape. Whereas, with a more, like you said, if they had been more substantially remaking the game rather than kind of remastering it from a mechanics point of view, you probably would say, no, look, well, it's about exploration, so you don't make the jumps precise like that. That's what you would do now. But in 89, on that kind of run of games that, Zelda 2, I think had quite a role in kicking off, but I'm sure it's not all down to that. This is the sort of thing you got.
I remember growing up on, well, not exactly, because it was not my NES, but I remember going to friends' houses, and we would frequently rent games like Rygar, which were, felt epic and were pretty cool, but were so much jankier than this is. I feel like Lizard Cube and choosing Wonder Boy 3 Dragon's Trap chose well, because if there's one game of that era, of that genre, that I would just paint over and think well, the bones are solid, the jumping, the gameplay is mostly good. I think this was a good choice. If you go, and you can go play on NSO Rygar, you can try, but you've got the enemies that spawn on you. You've got the jumps that, if you think jumps are finicky here, you've seen nothing.
Rygar's awful. Yeah.
Yeah, but
and so I don't know.
Rygar's not really about exploration in the same way.
Well, but the interesting thing with Rygar is that it's an arcade port. Well, so an arcade, sort of
in the same way that Ninja Gaiden was a port of the
yeah, exactly. It's essentially its own game. It took the scenario and stuff, but did something quite different with it, which was again meant to be much more of a home-friendly kind of idea, right? It happened quite a lot back then with NES because it couldn't faithfully replicate arcade games very well. But, you could do something different with it. And oftentimes, in retrospect, something more interesting and better, like Bionic Commando, for instance, is often cited in that kind of vein and so forth. So Rygar, would do, and other things would do that. But equally, they would probably still keep certain, arcadey aspects that they didn't particularly need to or shouldn't have done. But it's just because that was so embedded in the way that games were made and the expectations that the developers had of what the players would want. You know, it's just like, well, you know, video game players, they are arcade game players. This is what they expect. This is what they want. So it just kind of, you know, there was just this sort of inertia there that even if you were doing something where you think you're tailoring it for the home, it's still informed by that arcade background. And yeah, you know, if you were doing it from scratch now, you'd probably be better served getting that stuff all the way out of it. But, you know, that's just the context in which it was made.
Like, I can agree that you're correct and still say they made the wrong decision in 2016. That fundamentally they poured a lot of effort into this game and that it needed not a ton of changes to make it significantly less player unfriendly. I'll give an example I have is the lack of a checkpointing system. And the fact that you might get a potion if you're lucky to give you a better chance at it, but you probably won't. Occasionally you can buy a potion, but not that frequently. Well,
you've got those chests that you can find. Like, secrets will help you usually.
That you can find, yes.
Yeah, so it's a reward. Like the reward for exploration for finding secrets is a potion that will let you, you know, more easily get to the end of the area that you're exploring and finish off.
I only did find once, so like, yeah, it's entirely possible that maybe I passed some of them, but at the same time, like,
admittedly, this is not my first time playing it, so I already was on the lookout for, you know, some of the secrets, which I probably still remembered, you know, more or less where they were.
Or at least, I mean, I wouldn't make any bets about my capacity to remember specific secrets 8 years on or whatever. But at least the general kind of nature of the game, right? You know, what people talk about with Metroid, the Metroid sense of like that wall, the way it's framed looks suspicious. So it's not that you remember that wall specifically, it's that you remember the general nature of like when there's a lot of wall in a bit of a Metroid room and it's suggests that there's something you can bomb. In this case, it's just, you know, would be the way that certain things are laid out. It kind of suggests, you know what, it's expecting you to plow straight on and miss this. But, you know, if we just check this other place first, there's a heart in a chest, and then it's like to expand your health meter, and then you keep applying that principle as you go on, and you end up finding those hearts pretty reliably, you know, because it's a pretty dependable pattern, and that's the kind of stuff that, you know, I didn't have to learn this time because I already did it 8 years ago.
Yeah, I played through with a guide, so I got everything, but I loved it. I have no regrets doing that because it was getting pretty frustrating at the start because I really had no idea what I was doing, and it was very disorienting for me at the start just because of the way the levels are. Like what James talked about, you know, you'll miss a jump and you'll fall just down into this area, and you're like, oh, Jesus, okay, now I have to figure out this area. I don't even know where I'm going. So really threw me quite a bit, but once I got that guide, there's a really good one on Game FAQs, and man, I was off and running, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, but I didn't really have to think about anything. I knew exactly where to go. But yeah, it just made it entirely. I went from being like, oh man, this game's gonna be such a drag, to like, oh wow, this is actually really cool. Like once you actually have. But I think that's one of the overall problems with the game is it doesn't really tell you much or give you any hints really in any way. Like some of the weapons and armor.
The game needs a fucking map.
It
well,
does.
Yes and no. I mean,
it does.
Like, there are a few. Everything starts from the village, and then you go like there's basically like 4 directions that you can go in, and there are areas beyond those 4 that like just necessitate that you go left instead of right, or go further than you did the first time before.
Let me give you an example of why a game needs a fucking map. You go through the mouse one. You buy the equipment. If you have enough money, which you probably won't, you buy the equipment before you become the mouse that is good for characters that aren't the mouse. By the time you get to the mouse, you buy equipment that's actually good for the mouse. But at that point, there's not a shop that sells the equipment you missed earlier that would be good for Fishman. Mouse's equipment is not good on Fishman. If you could not afford that equipment, which the only way I was able to afford some of it was by grinding for money, then do you have to remember where the shop was that had the equipment that would be fine for him? Because not all shops sell the same thing.
Yeah, I had the same problem, actually. Yeah. I was like, and I did look at a guide, and they were like, yeah, get the samurai stuff from the jungle. And I was like, the jungle? Where was that? Because it felt like quite a long time ago in my playthrough, but yet I finished the game under 5 hours. Like, to get back to your complaint about the no checkpoint, I felt that initially too when I ran out of potions to revive me, and I felt like, oh shit, I'm all the way back to town. And then I went back to the area where I died, and I realized, like, okay, that was like less than 5 minutes away.
Yeah, like, but I don't want to replay those 5 minutes.
But then, like, that's how you get some more money than you did the first time around, and maybe like you figure out how to traverse the world better. You realize like, oh yeah, right. Like I've got this armor that actually makes me impervious to lava, and that's great for this bit here where I can actually use this to go kill this enemy that's on that platform over there and then go back up. And like, anyway, like there are things that you learn as you go back to areas and like try to tackle them the second time.
I did. So my vibe on it is I really don't enjoy the enemy encounters because for so many of them you have to stand there and wait for them to move before you can attack. Because they'll jump at you if you don't. And then the stupid not lock it to overhead that you can almost never hit because the arrow is really hard to use and you don't get that many of them.
You don't necessarily get that many of them. I mean, sometimes you get on a run of them getting dropped, which I'm not sure if there's anything underlying that or it's just entirely random. But that obviously is like the cloud killer, but you're not bound to have it at any given moment.
Right. Yeah. And so I got stuck in a stage where there were two of them and an enemy that took a full heart away every time it hit me. And I had to hit it like 4 times. It's like, this sucks.
There is an item, a piece of armor that you can wear that will give you more item drops. And it is the very last thing that you could possibly get because you have to go through all the special hidden unknown worlds or whatever they're called, unknown stages.
So when it's least useful.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's when like you finish everything and like it's the last thing that you get. So it's I
ended up almost exactly the same as the file that was already on there. And so it turns out I had 3 of the stones that I believe you're referencing there, not all of them. But, I did it quicker. That's something. No, I mean, there's that lucky sword. What does that actually do?
More money.
Money, right? So that it doesn't increase weapon drops; it increases money drops, right? That yes. James was talking about the notion of the enemies kind of holding you up, if you like, because you move around quite fast. There's a nice pace to your character's movement, I feel like, for a game of this vintage. There's a number of elements of it, I feel like, that I would have, if I'd played this, back when I was a kid, the mass system was quite popular in the UK, as I understand it, but I didn't have one, than NES. And, a game of a similar ilk that I did play when I was a kid back then in the late 80s was Simon's Quest. Now, that has quite a lot of similarities. One of the things that's not ideal about that is that, you have that legacy from the first game of, Simon Belmont's kind of movement, and it's a lot more sort of trudging than this is. This is definitely better suited to, a sort of zippy exploration context than Castlevania was. That's for damn sure. But what I don't like, actually, more than the notion of the enemies holding you up, is when you kill them, you have to wait for the money to jump up in the air. Oh my god,
just put it in my inventory.
That is the bit I really quite dislike, actually. That feels much more like... It's one thing, if I'm fighting an enemy, it's a fight. It's fine. Like, I need to beat this thing. I shouldn't have to, if I have to wait to do that, that's kind of part of the game, if you like. Although, what's part of the game is whatever the developers say is part of the game, but you take my meaning. with the money just waiting for it to spawn, essentially. I don't know if that had a technical underpinning for why it was that way on the Master System or anything, but yeah, that really is kind of, because again, as it has already been mentioned, like, even if you do end up dying and you don't, like, see it through to beating a particular boss in a particular location, if you've earned a bunch of money, it's not quite the same as, like, experience points in an RPG, because, as James mentioned, you do still need to be able to go to a specific shop to buy something that you think is useful, right? Rather than the more automatic process of just leveling up. In an RPG, but it's similar, right? If as long as you did get like a bunch of money, that is something that's going to come in handy. Because, generally the character specific kind of enhancing gear tends to be cheaper, but if you build up a war chest, you can go and buy stuff that's good for anyone.
But except they're not selling that in the village.
Well, but there's fairly early on, there's somewhere you can go with the mouse that has a shop with some expensive stuff, but it's good for everybody. So once you know where that is, you may not build up that much cash as the mouse necessarily the first time that you're in that form, but later on when you realise, how you can, change. You could come back there and start spending on gear that's good in general. So it's like all of that stuff is fair enough. But what I don't like is where you get to this point of like, okay, I know what I'm doing in this place now. I can go through here really quickly, but I also, if I want to earn the money that you definitely do because it's useful, I have to do it not so quickly because I have to wait for it to spawn and all. Wasn't a great choice back then, and it's another one of those things I'd put in the category that James mentions, where it's like, if you were allowing yourself to redesign elements, that would be a real easy one. That's some low hanging fruit right there.
The thing is, like, when I was a kid, I probably would have enjoyed the feeling of collecting that coin, because I enjoyed it in, oh my god, what is the beat 'em ups?
Kunio-kun, yeah.
River City Ransom,
yeah. River City Ransom, you pick up the money on the ground. There's also Fazanadu. Also had the bouncing coin thing. So it was like a common thing back then in games, and I guess I ate it up, but now things have changed and you expect your character to just vacuum up the coins that are near enough.
Every enemy I killed in the lava section, the money landed in the lava on the first bounce.
Yeah, you gotta catch it. Well, yeah, you don't let it bounce the first time.
You can't.
That's part of the skills.
It spawns over the lava and falls in the lava with the bad jump.
That's why you deliver the killing blow when it's not over the lava.
With my reach of less than an inch from my body, no thanks. These systems don't coalesce together.
Let the enemy come to you, James.
So they can knock me into the lava. Yes, see, this is the problem. None of these mechanics work together. They're all bad. Everything here is bad. The people who said we should make it just like it is are bad people who should have to write letters of apology by hand until they get arthritis.
How do you feel about people that wanton use of hyperbole? Are they bad people as
well? No, they're correct. No, I actually believe the person who made that decision should have to write handwritten notes until they develop arthritis. I think that is a fair punishment.
Yeah, the hitboxes can be a bit picky at times.
They're terrible, especially in the boss fights, where it's like you have to jump in.
One thing I feel about, it's kind of, I feel almost like the mouse form probably should have come first. It would have felt, I feel like that would have felt more natural in that, you start off as like the smallest thing with the most pitiful reach. Again, this is not uncommon in games of this. It's Zelda 2, that attack range.
The attack range in Zelda 2 is significantly better than the attack range in this.
Yeah, but it's also the only attack range you're ever going to get.
That's true.
Whereas, like with this, it would have made more sense if it's something where it's like, okay, for the very first curse that you get, which is it's an interesting sort of thing that we haven't talked about, the way the game opens with the end of the preceding game in the series.
Yes.
And then, that's the jumping off point for the start of this game. Which is something that Castlevania would go on to do with Symphony of the Night, where it has the final boss of Rondo as the jumping off point for the rest of that game. But in this case, it's like, okay, yeah, so you're being cursed. It just seems like it would make most sense if it's kind of like, and you're generally kind of getting more powerful as you I mean, there's, they all have strengths and weaknesses. They all have differences. And so you can explore underwater, you can explore in the air with the different forms and stuff, but it just would feel more natural to me if it's like, okay, you start off with this thing that's really, really puny and the reach is, really kind of pathetic, but you don't ask too much of, the player in that form. And then you graduate to stuff that has better range. And then eventually you kind of come back and say, oh yeah, but you can find some of these hidden areas and stuff with that little mouse form, because it can stick to the walls and stuff, and kind of have that as something that it's like, well, yeah, you can sort of voluntarily reimpose those restrictions on yourself if you want to do more exploration and find more cool stuff, or another, that shop I spoke about that has some of the expensive gear that's good for everyone. That to me would have felt more natural than kind of, you start with the, the fire breathing form where the attack range seems quite fine. And then we go backwards. It's a little bit, they all kind of, I didn't find any of those sort of changes too jarring. It kind of gave it a nice, almost like episodic feel of, rather than the usual, what we come to expect of, Metroid games, where it's just a kind of, upward curve of empowerment all the way. It is kind of interesting to mix it up a bit more, so it's not just kind of linear like that. But still, I kind of feel like, to me, that would have been more natural.
Like, I could get what you're saying, but I found playing as the mouse to be insufferable. Like, if the mouse's section had been designed around, going through tight spaces and exploring and finding stuff, I would be fine with that. But there is a shitload of combat as the mouse with no reach. Like, no reach. It does have a shield. It can block projectile attacks, but so does the Fishman, which has more reach, has at least has some reach. So like if they were going to go that route, they should have built the stage around what that character, not just what power that character has. Oh, the Fishman can swim, therefore we can put barriers that require swimming. Or the mouse can walk around the walls, so we can put areas that require walking around the walls. But actually develop stages and encounters around what that character has. Because ultimately, the difference between the Fishman stage and the mouse stage that precedes it is really nothing until you get to the lava area. It's the same kind of enemies, it's the same kind of encounters. It's the stupid dandelions, the sunflowers that are invincible unless you hit them directly in the face, which requires a jump attack with the bad jump and the bad timing. Like, it doesn't feel like any consideration was put into what that character can do when they built the combat around the stage, or the combat encounters around the stage.
There's the gating, but not necessarily the level design as a general matter that kind of feels specific to it. And I think some of that is because I don't think the level design is that evolved in general, right? It's just the level design is pretty soft, if you like. It's just like a lot of, and this is something that you'd get in, kind of the latter. Igarashi developed Castlevania, Symphony of the Night onwards kind of games, where it's just like, it's kind of just like you're walking along, bunch of enemies, it's not like the more like action, classic Castlevanias where the platforms are like really specifically placed and everything feels very designed. There's definitely stretches of this. Not entirely, but there's definitely some parts that feel more designed than this, but there are definitely others where it just feels a little bit like, it's not that specific to the character. It's not specific to anything. It's just kind of like, you're going to see a bunch of enemies. You've just got to be, careful and kill them, and obviously if you've got better gear, that's going to be easier, right? So that's
the thing, though. I feel like there's that aspect of empowerment that maybe they were trying to bring to the game. Like, yes, the mouse is kind of a bit of a pain in the ass to use, and especially for some of the combat. But then you go back as the lion who swings a sword vertically, you know, like has so much more a wider attack.
It's a good defensive as well as an offensive element, isn't it? Because even if you get enemies coming from above you, you've got the fact that he swings it over his head.
But that's so late. Like that is
it is late, but that seems appropriate to me. What I said about the mouse seems like it should go first because it's puny. The lion should be late, right? Because it feels like strong. Like that seems like it's in the right place. But I still feel like the mouse should have gone earlier and shouldn't have been as it should have been a lesser dependence on it in those more conventional action settings. I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, I just I particularly like that boss battle actually cleared on the first try. I'll tell you, when I lost I lost the second boss fight. This first one I lost, and it zipped me all the way back to the start of the game, and I almost quit at that point. I'm like, fuck that, that's terrible, and I stand by it. I still think that was awful, but. Especially
one thing that happened with the mouse, like, is it with the mouse that we fight the daimyo dragon, like the Japanese daimyo? Like what happens was that, just like you, James, I hadn't had the money to buy the good sword in the jungle.
So you have to hit it like 20 times.
Oh, it was more than that. I think I was doing less than 1 damage. Like, I think that I was doing damage consistently with a fireball, which I had 3 of. And then, but he's got 99
it sucks.
of health. And so I brought him down to 96. And then I actually might have been doing like maybe 2 swipes of a sword would get the number down or something. It was very bad.
That is one of the problems of doing this kind of design, right? On the one hand, you know, you give it that element where, you know, what people talked about with the original Dragon Quest, right? It's kind of like, well, if you just keep playing it, eventually you'll kind of be able to brute force it because, you know, in that case, you know, your level's just going to go up that high that you can't help but beat stuff. In this case, presumably just, you earn enough money, you're going to buy good gear eventually.
If you can get to that gear shop. Which is the problem I have with Fishman.
The problem, like I said, it's not as automatic as Dragon Quest in that regard.
Yeah, and also in this case, like, it's not really, you know, it's almost a requirement. Like, you have to have bought that sword, just like in Ys, like the early ones. I don't know if you remember, but like you would fight a level, a boss, and like, okay, I'm doing no damage.
Ys Book 1
and
and 2.
Then you raise 1 level. Yeah, you go up 1 level, and it's like, oh, okay, now I'm supposed to.
Now I'm kicking his ass.
Yeah, it's again, like with something like Dragon Quest, it's been more granular. Whereas when you're talking about like specific bits of gear here, or you know maybe how leveling works in other RPGs. It can go from just like inadequate to much more than adequate in terms of damage and stuff. So that's the problem of not, you know, if you're doing something that's more like, you know, the original Castlevania, where it's just like, okay, you can design a boss around, you know, what you expect the character to have available to them, then, you know, it's easier to design that boss and be a satisfying character. Although, to be fair, even the original Castlevania did have some elements that could essentially obviate the boss design. Like if you've got triple holy waters, you could just stun lock them to death. But certainly, you know, getting there with that was no mean feat. So I guess you could say it was, you know, a reward for that.
Yeah, I would say that's a reward. Whereas the default state was, this is still a perfectly capable fight. Whereas I would say the default state of that mouse battle in particular, where I was doing 4 damage per hit, which you can imagine means I had to hit it 25 times, which sucked.
Yeah.
Like
I can't really defend the boss battles.
The other thing I would say about the boss
the
battles is
game, basically.
They do have an element that is a bit like those Castlevania bosses of the original. I wouldn't say they're probably as good as that, but there's an element in that. It's like if you can sort of just get them. It's not quite stun lock, but it's more like a cycle of just like you keep knocking them back and then they just keep coming onto your attack. Like if you just get in that cycle,
right,
they go down really easily, even if you haven't necessarily got like equipment that just annihilates them. But on the other hand, they can get you in a cycle where it just like you just keep kind of rubbing up against them all the time.
Well, and it's like that dragon that Gil mentioned, because it has that projectile that just sprays a cloud of them. You can just get bounced between those clouds the whole length of the stage. It's like
and you can't control yourself in the air either.
No.
It just bounces you back, and until you hit the ground, you can't move again.
But
right, at least usually it doesn't do that much damage, unless your gear is really.
Which it was. My gear was not good. The other issue I ran into with that boss is because the mouse has such a tiny hit range, and its vulnerable spot is at the top of the jump. Because where else would you put it? If you missed it by a little bit, then you got hit by the fog gas and you got shot all the way back to the end of this. It's like, God, this sucks. This sucks so bad. But Greg, you're right. Like, if I got it into a rhythm and I didn't screw up by pressing the attack button 1/1000th of a second too late or too early, I could just hit him every time and he couldn't really do anything.
Yeah, if they start like they can't just get an attack off.
Right.
All they seem to do then is just fall onto your next attack, and so it's very polar. It's either you're constantly kind of going the knockback, and or they're constantly getting. You don't have like what presumably should be a better medium in there where you're both getting your licks in and it's back and forth and it has a bit more tension and drama to it.
Right.
So not great, but again I would say this, obviously the kind of vanilla level design, the bosses are a bit kind of in both cases, though, I would say, again, significantly better than Simon's Quest.
Yeah, but I mean, I hate Simon's Quest, so that's not saying that much.
No, but that's his contemporary, though. That's the point. I mean, this is what... I mean, it was a little bit after, because I want to say Simon's Quest was like 87 or so, and this was 89 or so, but the fact of the matter is, like, with Simon's Quest... those mansions where it's kind of okay, you've got the exploration, you've got the day-night cycle, you've got the villagers that lie to you or speak gibberish and the non sequiturs that
was
unlock
just a bad translation, though.
Some of it was bad translation, but supposedly I think some of the original intent was that some people would say things that were misleading.
Yeah, but there was a character that told you some characters lie. That's not in the English version.
But the point is, all of that would be something you could set aside if, like, when you got in those mansions, they were like cool Castlevania levels. Yeah. But they're not. They're like, let me just, like, every fifth step I take, I have to use the holy water to see if this is a trick floor or not. I mean, it's just dreadful. And then the bosses are the bosses are total non-entities. So again, while, in this case, you could say leaves things to be desired. For me, they were still actually quite enjoyable, even while I could recognise that is true. That they are kind of simplistic or, not like exquisitely well thought out. They still crossed a bar of, sort of basic kind of competence there that I felt kind of worked. Whereas, a lot of the games that were doing some of the same stuff around the same time did not clear that bar.
So I take your point that it was a year after Castlevania 2, but that means it was a year before Castlevania 3, which obliterates that bar. But also...
Oh, yeah, well, Castlevania 3 is a more traditional... I mean, it has elements like the branching levels and all that, but it's much more back to that first game of, like, let's design things specifically around the character movement and what we've got. Although you had the other characters as well to consider, that you could recruit and whatnot that to do different things. Not that Castlevania 3 didn't get things wrong, because that falling block level is rubbish.
Jesus.
But that Castlevania 3 is a much more, a much greater accomplishment of design, right? That's really kind of where that excels, and it helps when you narrow the focus, right?
Sure.
That was kind of the trade-off. If you expand the focus, and people you have more options, and then you're kind of left with looser design, right? That just isn't as sort of meticulously created and not as satisfying.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I understand why they got where they got. I just think they made the wrong call. And I think that applied in 86 when they were making that game. And I think that implied in 2016 when they modernized it. I think they both made different wrong calls, but they both made the wrong decision. Like, this would have been an imminently better game if the Lizard Cube team said, hey, the team that made this game kind of fucked up in some places. Let's fix that. Let's make this, even if it was a mode, like, hey, unfucked mode. This is the mode where the game's not messed up in weird ways. Or we've rebalanced the economy. Or we've made it so when you see an item in a store, you can then just buy it in town. Like, even if it was something that simple. That way you don't have to try to, like, okay, well, there was armor I could have afforded, but I can't go there now because I'm not the mouse anymore. Which is what I ran into with the Fishman. So I had to go through the volcano where everything basically killed, or the what do they call that? The lava area? Where everything basically killed me in 2 shots. Because I didn't have the right armor.
Well, and the thing is too, I think is it the Tasmanian sword where it lets you change forms? But like,
it doesn't explain that at all.
That's exactly it. It doesn't explain that at all.
Yeah.
But it's huge. Right? Like, it basically changes the entire game.
Like, I'll give you an example.
Yeah, I had it forever and until I realized, because there's like a little cute text in the shop or whatever that
this sword makes you happy. It's like, what the fuck does that mean?
Like something beasts, and it's like, okay, like I kind of maybe think I know what you're going for, but then like it's looking up an FAQ, I realize like, oh shit, okay, how do I use this again? And it's not exactly intuitive.
But like, here's a level design thing, and I'm harping on the lava area because I got really mad there. If you fall in that lava pit, there's no getting out of it. You have to walk, constantly getting hit stun to one end or the other, because your character can't jump high enough to get out.
Yep. Yeah, you're screwed. Unless you have the armor which you can't invulnerable to lava.
Which you can't have bought yet.
Yes, which you can't buy.
Or unless you're the dragon, right?
But
the dragon is the dragon.
But the dragon. That wouldn't be the way the dragon goes. That's where you'd go after you were the fish person.
So, right, and even if you have the Tasmanian sword, you wouldn't even know how to use the sword to change into the dragon
there's just so many things that the Lizard Cube team could have done to be like...
I feel like I went to the lava area first as the dragon before I did the desert.
You wouldn't have been able to hurt anything, because the damage is so high there to kill things.
It took me a while, but it wasn't that bad. Maybe I had like an upgrade somewhere.
Because I would say with the sword... The samurai sword. I think it was the samurai sword. It was 4 or 5 hits to kill the Onis that shoot the rocks. But it took them 2 hits to kill me.
Yeah. But like usually they're in a spot where you can corner them and
unless there's 2 on screen at the same time. Which there were.
And again, I mean, I think some of this opacity kind of stuff, again, that was even that has a bit of a link to arcade stuff.
Sure,
because the Tara Draga was a big deal in Japan, and a lot of that was based around like. It was just like it's deliberately opaque, and the idea is people are gonna spread this lore about the game like at the game center in Japan or whatever, and then you had kind of the like MSX games and stuff where it was again it was very much based around just like make it as the impenetrability is a feature essentially of that kind of and obviously this is a much more sort of lenient and kind of simplified game compared to any of that kind of stuff, but that's the context into which it was born, right? Is that you just you're just gonna keep playing this game and you're gonna discover things, or you're gonna talk to other people that have played it, and they'll tell you stuff, or you'll kind of check notes and all that kind of stuff. It's just obviously such a very different kind of approach to the way that you'd make a game of that sort today, where there would like you said, obviously for a start, the map to make it more transparent how everything connects together and how you navigate it, and
even if it was just where you've already been, so like you can remember it that way.
The stuff that you've mapped out. And like you said, I think that's so good that it's just like, if you found something, if you found a shop in some corner of the world, you know, it sends a carrier pigeon back to the, you know, the home base.
Who sells
and they start
nothing useful after the first 5 minutes.
No, it just becomes an obsolete place, really, in town. So, yeah, that would definitely kind of make sense. I mean, there's so many things, that would, absolutely. But it's still...
But this is like a game that took me, like 5 hours to play through this time. Like it was meant also, like some of that was to maybe stretch the time that would take a little kid to actually play through.
I don't doubt that.
But again, like I'm critiquing the Lizard Cube team at this point, though. Like they aren't working under the same, like, don't let the rental market ruin this game for us mentality.
Oh yeah, no, but I assume it's a decision you've got to make in terms of, you know, what kind of can of worms that opens up about having to rebalance it and everything. You've got to decide, you know, whether, you know, you've got the budget to be able to do that when you don't know how well it's going to sell. Maybe you think, you know, it's going to sell primarily off the back of the artwork and you know, the people that know the series or something, so that it's a better decision to... Obviously, that's an economic decision. That's not just a game design decision. But you know, I feel like, you know, they kind of... It was you could say it's a little bit of a conservative kind of decision, but it's still, you know, for me, it still works the way it is. And I do kind of, as somebody who did play, you know, some of those sorts of games at the time and has played, you know, quite a few more of them afterwards, there's sort of an interest for me in putting it in that kind of lineage and seeing, you know, how it stacks up and, you know, what it does better than some of those things and, you know, what it may have done less well than some of those things. And I really feel quite strongly if I'd had the opportunity to play this in the late 80s, I would have enjoyed it very much. You know, I think, you know, the bad or, you know, sort of less well conceived elements would have faded much more into the background, and all the things I do like about it, you know, would have stood out quite strongly, which is not something I necessarily would have expected. The Master System didn't have a great reputation in my mind anyway when I was a kid. It was very much the case of like, okay, so basically like it's mostly for arcade conversions, and it kind of does that better than the NES does, but it also still can't come close to the arcade conversion, the arcade original, right? So it's like, okay, you can get like a pretty good version for an 8-bit of R-Type on there, and it's better than it would be if you was doing it on the NES. But it's still not the real R-Type. So what's the point of it? Like that's the kind of impression I had from, you know, the magazines I could read and, you know, other people that did have Master Systems and stuff. But yeah, something like this, something that was actually much more of a you know, proper console game that had, you know, some like originality to it in that way. It's not really what I associated with the Master System. And I think I really would have liked it if I'd had the chance.
Yeah, and like this kind of like 2D side-scrolling adventure game like was kind of catnip to me. Like I did eat up Rygar, despite the fact that it was kind of janky. Like the epic music just sold me on it. You know, that's why we kept renting it over and over again. Games like Fazanadu also, but like I'm looking at the timeline here and. This kind of touches on a question that PPCo had in the Discord for the Retroactive. He asked, curious what you all think. Did this game bring a crazy amount of new ideas to the table, or was it leaning heavily on titles like Metroid and Zelda 2? And I don't think I have the breadth of knowledge about everything that was available, especially in Japan back in that day. But I'm looking at like, so Zelda 2 was like January 87. This Fazanadu was November 87. Something like, Wonder Boy, I said 88 at some point, but you were right, Greg, it's 89. I was looking at Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair, which was an arcade game. You don't need to know about this. Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Remember when I yelled last week about how this series has the worst naming? I'm right. Again.
2 Wonder Boy 3s. Yeah, completely different. And Gargoyle's Quest was May 1990. And I feel like it's almost like a straight, graph, like it's not exponential, but like you can see like there's improvements from all those titles, like from one to the next. I don't know if Falcom played the, Adventure of Link before they released Xanadu, and like if they took inspiration from it, and then, like these developers, West One, whatever, like played Xanadu, and then like Capcom played all those games and was like, well, we can do better. But I mean, I feel like they all kind of maybe not built upon each other, but there are more and more concessions, like more and more of a progression from the arcadiness that you were talking about, Greg, towards a more console or home experience.
We could design this more on its own merits, right? And it's its own experience rather than just like the expectations of the players, which are heavily assumed to be heavily informed by the arcade. But just to point out like how much this kind of game was very de rigueur in Japan for a while, like the bloody Rambo game, for NES that developed in Japan. I can't remember who developed it in Japan, but it was a Japanese developer. That's like essentially like a Zelda 2 or a Simon's Quest kind of inflected kind of experience. It's just amazing how there was this kind of gold rush at a certain point for this kind of, everyone was trying to crack it, I think. And, I don't know how much it was specific games that were informing it or just this feeling of like, hey, maybe we can do something at home with the kind of side-scrolling action format that hasn't been done yet, and everybody's just kind of reaching for it and still not quite getting it right. Much more in the 16-bit era, you kind of feel like they started to nail it.
So I actually know the answer to your question just because they have a really dumb name. The company is Pac-In Video hyphenated. They made like 4 or 5 Rambo games. I'm not kidding. They also made I want to say they made a Thunderbirds game, and they made a Knight Rider game, and they all basically are like this. But I think the thing they're most known for is Lode Runner. They made one of the known Lode Runners. But yeah.
So you're saying there's unknown Lode Runners out there?
I mean, there are a lot of fucking Lode Runners. Oh, they made some Terminator games too. There's a lot of fucking Lode Runners. I think they made one of the ones that's more well known. Guillaume, to your numbering point, so I looked it up just try to make sure I understand it. Do you know what the sequel to Wonder Boy 3 is called?
Wonder Boy in Monster World.
Yep.
I've got the list.
Do you know what it's called?
Yeah. I've played most of these.
Do you know what it's called
actually,
in Japan though? Because this is where it's real fucked up.
Yeah, Wonder Boy 5, Monster World 3.
Oh, wow.
Get the fuck out of here with this bullshit.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we want to get into this. I feel like we have in the past, and like every time it doesn't get less confusing. The podcasting format is...
It's not going to stick in the memory. As
you could say,
I've heard this explained multiple times in different venues, and it still hasn't stuck because it's too counterintuitive to stick. If there's something intuitive to hang your hat on, it might stick in the memory at this stage of my life anyway. If it's not, it's just going to go.
You need one of those like red line, like corkboard conspiracy theory things, like the podcasting format is not like we can only deliver it in a linear fashion, the information, but this series just crisscrosses all over the place.
We are one day going to
it's a multiverse.
We're going to find a series one day where the sequel to 3 is 2. Like that. That feels like we're getting perilously close thanks to Japan. That we're going to be like, oh, here's this Famicom game where 3 was it came out release order 1, 2, 3, 2. And be like, wait, what? Excuse me?
Okay.
Pardon?
Okay. Because I was going to say, like, isn't that Bravely Default? But
no. I see what Bravely Default is 1, 2, 2. Oh, fucking assholes. God damn it, Square Enix.
So like I just quickly, I did play Wonder Boy in Monsterland, the arcade game. That's the game before this, I guess, if you omit Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair, which was another arcade game. It was weird. So it was a while ago. I don't remember the details, but it was very much a cross between Adventure Island / Wonder Boy, the first one, where you just run to the right as fast as you can, collecting fruit and, dodging enemies or killing them. But instead of shooting tomahawks, you were shooting, like you had a sword. And like as you were doing those Adventure Island things, you were trying to go fast. You were trying to collect stuff that would keep your health bar full, just like in Wonder Boy / Adventure Island, but you also were trying to collect money to buy upgrades for your dude, different armor and stuff like that. The boss battles, I remember, were very similar to this, where like they would stun luck you, push you off to all the way to the left side of the screen, and you would try to, jump and hit their heads very precisely. And it was like a weird thing, a trick that I read about and I could not replicate, where they were saying like, well, you want to like jiggle the arcade stick, or you want to jiggle left or right as you're killing the boss so that more coins spawn so that you can afford the good stuff. It's like, yeah, I did not read that immediately when I played through it, and so it was probably too late for me to get the cash to buy the good stuff and actually finish the game. I remember it being very, very, very frustrating. Because, yeah, like the last boss ended up being really tough. And it was almost, random if I would manage to hit the head or not. Because it was just, like there was too much shit going on the screen for me to avoid all the attacks. So, again, like in this context, Wonder Boy 3, Dragon's Trap. Excellent
What you're
game.
telling me is they had an opportunity to learn the lesson and didn't.
And they did, but, gradually.
No, they still...
Progress is not always a straight line, but in this case, it was a straight line. It was going up. It just, it was slow progress.
Well, one of the things that's kind of amusing as well is obviously the whole Adventure Island Wonder Boy thing, that's that sort of splitting off point, right? In terms of Wonder Boy, an arcade game, and Sega did home ports that were Wonder Boy, but then when it was ported to home elsewhere, it was Adventure Island, and then Adventure Island became its own series. But then like on the TG16, you not only had the Adventure Island series kind of kept going, but you also had a port of this game under a different name.
Right.
Because the aforementioned the aforementioned PP Co. Talked about actually they didn't play the version, the Switch version of the game that we played. They played the TG16 version called Dragon's Curse on the Wii Shop.
I fucked up. I was looking at Wonder Boy in Monster World.
How could you make such a boneheaded mistake, Guillaume?
So that's the thing. That was a weird feature of the TG60 or the PC Engine in Japan, is that it would have conversions of Sega games, like I think with Fantasy Zone on there and stuff as well. It seems odd considering they were kind of like a direct competitor in Japan. In fact, I think like the PC Engine did quite a lot better than Sega's hardware at various points, because
certainly
the Mega Drive did not enjoy the same early popularity in Japan that it did in the US or Europe. So it is weird that they did end up porting stuff, but yeah, so that's a different version. Obviously the PC Engine or TurboGrafx was a more capable machine than the Master System, and has, different kind of graphics and music, but naturally not to the same extent that you're going to get with the 2017 game.
So I'm going through the Master System's game library right now, and everything about it being surprised. No, no, this is their Japanese library is bad. So, like, I get it. I get why, and that makes.
I did like the fact that there was they included the FM soundtrack as part of the retro, because that would have been, I think, just in Japan.
Yes, it would have been.
Because it had that FM synth module over there. So stuff like Phantasy Star, for instance, you know, had an FM synth soundtrack rather than the PSG or whatever it is over in the Western versions. But you know, even though I don't know how many people played this in Japan, they still included that if you want the retro style soundtrack. But I mean, again, the enhanced soundtrack is so nice, it's hard to want to listen to the old, even though it's been pretty solid for 8-bit, you know, kind of music. It's just, I think they really nailed a particular kind of vibe that I think Nintendo ended up going with quite strong. Again, I wouldn't say they necessarily were looking at this and taking notes or anything, but, you know, in this case, you've got that richness of, you know, live instruments being played, but it's on this kind of modest scale that's got this kind of, you know, sort of charming, cozy kind of feel to it. And that's very much what Nintendo did for the Link's Awakening remake and Echoes of Wisdom, right? It's like, it's got that kind of richness to it, but it hasn't got the big scale of, you know, Skyward Sword and, you know, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, because they're little toys in a little model Zelda world. So it's a modest scale. It should sound kind of, you know, you know, have that charming kind of small scale quality to it. And, you know, for me, they got there first, in this particular case.
Yeah, it's a chamber quartet instead of like a, you know, like a 106-piece symphony. There's a couple parts playing. Actually, the music is probably the thing I like most about the game, to be honest. Like, I respect the work that did on the visuals. The style doesn't really wreck with me that well, but the music's really well done. I was trying to figure out who.
Well, this was like an early Switch game, right? And there was something about the visuals that convinced me that the Switch was like a really good upgrade, you know, like the Wii U screen was a little bit kind of crappy, and I feel like this game helped convince me that, like, wow, like, we've arrived, like, this can deliver experience.
So you were had
level stuff, or I don't know. Well, it's a very pretty game, and I mean, like, I know that now we've got the OLED model that looks better, but like the I don't know, the original Switch screen is no slouch, and I think that this is one of the games that help show, like, this can do really good graphics, guys.
Yeah. I mean, it looks nice. It's more of a style thing for me than a technical standpoint.
Sure.
The composer on this one is Shinichi Sakamoto, and it seems like his credits are a lot of this. But it does appear that he might have been involved in this in the remake in some way.
Yeah, I think there was definitely consultation with the some of the original developers in general.
Yeah.
Right? So even though, again, obviously the goal was to, you know, for, you know, kind of maximum fidelity while you know, to embellish in the presentation.
Yeah, like in terms of what games he worked on, it's a lot of Wonder Boy. It's a lot of fucking Wonder Boy. And then a bunch of stuff I've never heard of. So, stuff that never made it out of Japan. He did work on Dragon's Trap. He also apparently has a credit on the Game Gear Micro. I don't even know what to make of that.
Some sort of relationship with M2, maybe. I mean,
I guess.
I know M2 got their start doing the Game Gear version of Gunstar Heroes, and that's a lot of the reason why the Game Gear Micro exists. Basically, it's because, you know, it's like a reference to M2 history more than anything else. But I'm not sure what the connection would be.
Star Parodier he worked on. There you go. There's something that he worked on that someone outside of Japan might have heard of.
Yeah, again, might have that on the Wii Shop, Virtual Console collection, because it was, I think it was an import game, at least over here. Well, I guess all of TurboGrafx games were import games.
That's true.
Because I mean, people had them, but it was essentially like a grey market thing. You know, it was never actually like officially over here.
Oh, Space Adventure Cobra. There, another game I've heard of. And he worked on there was a Sega CD version of Dungeon Explorer? What the fuck? Why? All right.
Like, why exactly?
Like, why? Like legitimately, why?
Take that basic ass game and make it, give it better music?
I guess. Like, that's why squared. Why that system? Why that game? Oh, God. This poor man. Could somebody give this man a good product to compose for, please? He is that old school of, like, he did the sound and the music stuff. So, like, a lot of his credits are SFX. So,
programming, presumably, actually programming.
Sound drivers is another thing he was listed on. So, yeah. Different era.
Well, what you're dealing with here is a lot of, with the enhanced soundtrack, is kind of reorchestrations, right? You know, you've got a lot of that, right? The same melody is used a number of times. What they can do here with the better instrumentation is kind of, stretch out how differently, you can kind of orchestrate some of those same melodies, and it's, pretty effective. They get much more like mileage out of that composition that way.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, well, when we finish this conversation, should we read PPCo's email? Since
yeah, is he the person who nominated it? We should go check that, because the person who nominated didn't send anything. We're gonna have to call him out by name.
Well,
yes,
the person who nominated could be the Discord user currently known as Baby Mario Maker. I feel really uncomfortable saying that.
Also, another thing you missed because we lost the first segment.
Right, and
could have just said the stalk from Yoshi's Island. I don't understand.
Well, that's just delivering. Didn't make it.
There are a lot of comments, like people, typing, playing through the game, but like it's mostly, scattershot stuff. There is Biconite who, so Biconite wrote, just rolled the credits on this. The second time through is so much quicker. I was also way less cautious while playing this time around. This caused some frustration because to me the fighting seems like it wants to be slower. There's a bunch of enemies that make you wait for them to come to you. So yeah, like it just echoes like some of the same.
Exactly. James pointed out exactly the same thing, and the thing with the money exacerbates it, as we said.
Yeah, I feel like the game could have used a few more quality of life updates, a map, a button to change instead of
any
sword,
quality of life
and some
updates.
Sort of checkpoint system. Yeah, so Biconite basically it has the exact same complaints as you do, except that they actually enjoy the game.
Yeah, well, it has a quality of life update that's worth mentioning, is that you don't have to use a bloody password.
Oh, that's true. All right, fine. You're right.
The passwords are there. You can see them. You can prompt them to appear on the screen, but you don't actually have to bloody do it.
God. This is all right. So, do you know what? If they wanted to be authentic, they should have made you enter passwords. There.
Well, you can.
No, made you enter passwords, not let you enter passwords. If we're saying no, we can have saves, then yes, we can have maps. Done.
But you don't. It's too small of a game to. Anyway, PPCo wrote in to say, "Hey RFN crew, coming clean up front. I did not play the Switch version of The Dragon's Trap, but I did finally knock Dragon's Curse TG16 off my backlog. It was actually my last Wii Shop channel purchase, so this has been a long time coming." This game is genuinely impressive, non-linear, and full of surprises, uncharacteristically fair for its time, and quite ambitious for an 8-bit title. Going in blind to a game and series I knew little about was a blast. Discovering things like invisible doors to hidden shops, or falling into what I assumed was a death pit, only to find a whole new area, was always a treat. The form-swapping progression delivered a constant aha moment, and the core loop really clicked with me. Explore, upgrade, boss fight, transform, repeat. It's like a cute Metroid meets Mega Man hybrid, and now I desperately want an open world 8-bit Mega Man.
I wouldn't put Mega Man in this because Mega Man feels good.
Well, I would say though, there's the one
better.
Mouse Man, the Mouse Man Unknown level feels like something out of Mega Man. Just the way you have to. There's like a lot of jumping up and clinging to the wall and having to drop down very specifically onto a little platform, and then you have to keep moving in order to get momentum to stick onto the next wall. And yeah, that one, I always felt like that. I was like, it's the hardest unknown zone.
Yeah, considering they are optional, those areas have not necessarily like unambiguously good thing, but they do have some of the least vanilla design about them. You know what I say? It feels like they're kind of pushing it a bit more, and maybe because they are optional, they felt like they could. But it's kind of interesting that they sort of seem to be maybe taking some restrictions off there for those bits.
Yep.
Yeah. I will say to PPCO, there was more to the letter, but I mean, there's a lot that we already covered. If you like going through a pit and discovering like, oh, it's not death that awaits me, like it's a different area entirely. If you haven't played, I already mentioned Gargoyle's Quest. If you haven't played Demon's Crest, that's on the NSO as well, right?
Yeah, very
cool.
Nice.
So go play that. Like that's exactly the kind of cool secret that you're going to find. It's the same kind of progression too. Explore, transform, boss fight,
and that's kind of an interesting hybrid of this sort in terms of it's got a sort of stage by stage element to it. And yet it's also got retraversal elements too. It certainly shares a lot with Mega Man X games, not surprisingly given the pedigree. And they have some of those elements in them too, but I guess they're a bit
more particularly like, what is it? Like the Falcon, I don't know the name of Mega Man X bosses, but there's a stage with like the control towers basically that's completely different if you go after completing different stage.
Yeah. They change based on different bosses that you've already beaten in that case. And you get stuff like in Demon's Crest where it's like the forest burns down and it like changes the level. And so definitely quite a few of the same ideas being used. But I guess, Demon's Crest, if anything, is probably, a bit less traditional action game than Mega Man X, kind of like a furtherance of some of where the Mega Man X games were going. So it's somewhat different from Dragon's Trap, but very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, like I think I've said everything I had about this game. I really enjoy Dragon's Trap, and if you want a game that plays better, that is more modern, you've got the I can't get this wrong, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, which was the 2018 game developed by a different studio, developed by Game Atelier, but they clearly had the same love for Dragon's Trap as Lizard Cube did, but they went and made like new transformations, gave them more of a like platforming purpose, like you can transform into a sword. What am I saying? A frog. And, you can use the tongue to whip around, like to swing around. And like it plays better, but it's the same idea. And it's about, like 3 times as big.
Yeah, it's a much bigger, more substantial game and much more like the meaty kind of exploration, I guess. In a way, you said this is a different developer, but when we talked about like that kind of idea of like what if Lizard Cube had done more of a Streets of Rage 4 thing for Dragon's Trap rather than just a high fidelity kind of remaster. It presumably could have been quite a lot like that Monster Boy in the Cursed Kingdom, because it does, kind of. I enjoyed it definitely when I played that. I thought it, kind of executed on a lot of aspects of this kind of concept really quite well. Being able to take advantage of the years of this kind of, kind of side-scrolling exploratory action, having been executed so many, many more times. They put it to good use, but it still feels, like it's got rooted in the same kind of concepts at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I have to say, I have to add the large caveat of, playing through it with an FAQ that explained every single thing to me. What is, of course, very different from somebody who would just pick this up and play this cold. But I really, I went from pretty much like just saying I'm going to hate this to like, oh wow, this is actually really, really cool, because what it allowed me to do was really explore every nook and cranny of the game, get all the weapons, get all the armor, but also see how those things interacted, and really just kind of play through the game without having to really stress very much. And I think that's, when I look at James' experience, it's like that's probably the experience that I would have had and the opinion of this game that I would have had if I wouldn't have played it without literally a step-by-step guide. So, but that worked for me, right? I mean, that I really got my experience out of the game that I wanted, right? It's cool because this is the first Wonder Boy game or any of these ones that I've ever played through, and I've always been curious about them. Because I'll always I had a Sega Master System back in the day, and of course these games were coming out, and they always looked kind of cool, but I just for some reason never picked one up. So I'm really glad we were able to play through this one. It was really cool.
Yeah, there's a Genesis sequel that's more of this.
Proactively vetoing it.
Yeah, no.
Done.
I already closed the page, so I don't know what that game is called now.
Monster World 4?
Well, no, then there's almost certainly not called that. That's the only thing we can feel confident it won't be called that.
Right. But yeah, there's that one where you play as the girl, Monster World 4. But so that one is good too. I would recommend it, John.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it. I just downloaded Monster Boy.
Just my closing thoughts are: I hate this game, and I hate everyone involved in selecting it for this retroactive. And so, all my years of joking that I'm gonna pull rank, I'm actually doing it. I'm picking the next game. It won't be this. I'm gonna maximize pain. So look forward to it. Punishment for everybody. No, I'm gonna pick something I like. Because is it
also going to be 5 hours long? Because if it's not, you've invalidated the premise.
Right.
It might be. I don't know. But I took a shot at this game. I gave it a good try, and I just found it insufferable. So, yeah.
For 3 hours, but now everyone else has to pay.
For 80 hours. Yes, correct. Yep. That is the correct exchange rate. No, I'm not actually going to actively pick something to make people suffer. But look, I really disliked my experience here. And I think if we were playing the original, if the remake didn't exist and for whatever reason the wheels of fate had landed on us doing a retroactive on this game, I think I would have actually been more amenable to the original because I wasn't looking at it and obviously seeing a modern game. I think the disconnect between this feels like something that was made before I was born, which is not technically true, and it looking like something that could be made now was so pointed that it made my experience worse, if that makes sense. The gulf between expectation and reality was so extreme that it made the things that were frustrating. It would have been frustrating if it were the original.
Whereas, the first time that I played it, and this time certainly, I had no illusion about what this was. I remember being warned adequately that I was playing a 1989 game with a new coat of paint.
Yeah,
so that helps.
But fundamentally, I don't think it excuses. I still think that it opens up the Lizard Cube team for critique for that decision. Because I think even they would have said, "Oh yeah, they're shit in this game. It's bullshit." But that's what it was like in the original game.
Yeah, I guess you could make the argument of if you're not going to improve some of the flaws of the original game, then why even revisit it at all?
Well, I think it was, labor of the game that they played as kids and clearly love. And also, again, it takes less than 5 hours to play through.
So what?
Well, I just don't...
It doesn't excuse the problems.
Well, no, it kind of does. The lack of checkpoint...
It doesn't!
I get that today gamers would expect checkpoints, but being sent to the back to the starting point when you die
with no lives.
Boss
Actually, no, that's not true. Because most games had at least multiple lives.
But usually, like, if you've got the gear, like, you can take such a beating. Like, it's
but you just dropped a really important caveat.
Yeah, but
like super important. If you've got the gear,
getting the gear is usually not that hard.
I just explained why it's a problem. You can't get to the shop that has the gear. That's a major issue.
Well, I think the problem is
because you didn't have the money.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with the game is that it doesn't explain to you adequately the real sequencing that you should do. That's the whole thing. So you're just kind of flying blind a lot of the time, and the only real information...
You cut yourself off from the gear you need.
Well, the thing is, the only real information that you have about gear and weapons is that this is more expensive, and it improves your character, but you don't know necessarily how or why.
Or you don't know that it will improve your character when you get to the next form. It may make your character worse.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So there's that lack of information that I wish that they would have, even if they didn't want to muck with the original intent or the original gameplay. I just wish there would have been. I one of the comments I have written down here is I just wish that there would have been a hint system or something that explained all of that stuff.
Didn't the pig dude sometimes give you?
Yeah, I think he'll say things about where you might.
So
go
there was
next.
that. And like, especially at the beginning, I feel like there was really only one place that you could go.
Yeah, you said there's a limited number of options in terms of just directions from the town. So, you know. And
I mean, like, once you unlock, like, the mouse, like, the next place that you need to go to is a place where the mouse can go. You know, like, I felt it was pretty intuitive, but again, maybe I've got too much distance with the first time that I played this. Like, maybe there's some, like, you know, vestigial knowledge of how this game is set up.
If not in the specifics, in the kind of more broad strokes, like I said, I think
so.
That's just
I will concede that, you know, like, that knowledge might have helped me just find my way around more easily.
I mean, for example, with the mouse, right? Like, when you get that, it just says, okay, the mouse can, you know, walk on walls or whatever, but it doesn't really say, like, okay, look for these types of walls and stuff like that. So you're forced to find that stuff out by experimenting. And the controls are a little finicky with the mouse walking on walls, so it's easy to kind of miss. So, yeah, I just wish more stuff like that was just, like, really presented to you explicitly rather than kind of letting you figure it out.
Sure.
Yeah, for my sake, for my part, rather, I'd say, you know, I've got a pretty high tolerance for games with weird jumps. That's for damn sure. Of all of us, I would imagine I'm the most forgiving in that regard. And that's the thing. It's like, yeah, there's quite a lot of things about it that you can look at objectively and say, yeah, change this, change that. You know, but adjust this or that, all that kind of stuff. And yet, it's still, you know, for me, it's an enjoyable experience the first time, enjoyable experience this time. I would say for me, the audiovisual, you know, improvements are probably doing a decent amount of the lift there. I do find it's very, very pleasant. The music is certainly a strong point. That helps a lot. And, you know, I would say, you know, for me, the aesthetic is quite strong. You know what I mean? It's kind of just got this nice balance of being, you know, it's quite cute, but it's not like overtly cute. It's got that kind of, you know, it's certain amount of fidelity to the kind of weirdness of those sprites with the, you know, everybody's eyes, you know, the pupils are like too close together and all that kind of stuff, like, but embellishing it, and everyone, you know, the various forms, they look very determined, you know, like they're kind of goofy, but they're doing their best, like, you know, courageous hero face as they, you know, trudge on. All of that to me just fits together perfectly with the vibe of the game.
Like a skip in their step almost.
The way the Hawk forms kind of, you know, bounds along with the, you know, and all that. Like, it just, to me, it's got this kind of like plucky, small scale, cute, but not like saccharine feel that just
it's almost like
fits
kids,
together.
Kids dressed up like knights sort of thing. you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Kind of
it like it's cute, but not like sickeningly. So there's a balance that works for me, and I do think that helps pay some of the stuff that doesn't really kind of pass muster. When you're looking at it with an analytical eye, you kind of forgive it more. I certainly do, and enjoy what there is to be enjoyed with it, which I think certainly, with the context of what, some of those games that came out, its contemporaries and whatnot, I think, it was a pretty well executed, for what it was attempting to do back then. And, you can still enjoy some of those things today.
Just want to call out the kind of the plain area. That's just, parallax out the wazoo. It's really, really pretty. And then you switch back to the old graphics and there's fucking nothing. Nothing.
No, like I said, there's a lot of light right at the start. There's some serious license going on here. They really do. And like I said, I don't know whether it's like playing it with the OLED this time, the bigger screen, better screen, but it really did stick out to me just how much like with the lighting and like I said, some of those with those areas where they're going for scale, right? So they've actually got a bit of geometry going on with the environment to make it feel like, this is not just another flat background that's in an intimate place. Like there's this big expansive thing, yawning into the background and stuff like that. Just how much that gives you the feeling of actually being on a journey in this game that the Master System graphics just could not possibly convey.
Yeah, because like the Master System is not a powerful system despite its name. It's also full of weird, fucked up games where you can tell where they really hit the ceiling of that system. And if you look at the graphics, you can see where they did it. There's also a lot of really garish colors on Master System games to kind of make up for that. And in some of the original style graphics of this game, you can see that too, where they're just like, I don't know, it's a Master System game that the sky should be purple. And it's like, okay, the sky's purple. There it is. Why? Because the ground is green. Cool. Thumbs up. So yeah, like visually, they did a lot here, and I appreciate the work that was, because if you press the button to flip between them, you get that impression. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't have much else positive to say, so I won't. Look forward to some fucked up shit on the next Retroactive. I don't know. All right, so as I mentioned at the start of the show, we recorded a whole reaction segment on Mario Kart World Direct. I'll summarize it real fast. White making fuck me eyes. That thing's got a long neck. 15 minutes, and they didn't say a whole lot of new stuff. Also, this game has a weird cast, but I'll kind of let us roll back through again. So, as we mentioned, this is 15 minutes. It was, it's been about 2 weeks now since the Switch 2 Direct, right?
Yeah.
So,
April 2nd.
Yep.
Yeah. So, like, they told us we were going to get this. They ran the Treehouse Live segments the day of the Direct and the day after, of which Mario Kart World was a significant component. They've had the Media Day demo where they got to go hands-on with it. There's been a lot written about it. And they've had some of the live public events. I don't know if they have not done them all because they run through June. Where people have gotten to play Mario Kart World. So many people have seen this game at this point. And so in terms of new content, or like totally new content, stuff that we did not know, it's entirely possible the answer is zero. There's none. But in terms of bringing all that content into one place and then bundling it up, it feels like much more that's what the purpose of this Direct was.
Yeah, that's right. And I think in that sense, I think the biggest thing is not so much that, there's no place or purpose for this particular video. I do question the sort of decision to label it as a Direct and give it that multiple week countdown, essentially, when it does mostly seem to be like, okay, there's gonna be all this information out there about the game from the Treehouse, stuff and, the journalists, the actual media hands-on and whatnot. But that's all going to be kind of scattered about, or more long form videos in the case of Treehouse. So, maybe we should have something that kind of is going to collect a lot of that stuff together and go, straight to people, eyeballs that subscribe to the YouTube channel or whatever. And, then they'll be kind of more up to date on, some of the things that are meant to make the game seem more desirable, I guess. But, I don't doubt that you got more eyeballs on it by labeling it as a direct, but the downside of it is you're probably going to get more people who, like myself, for instance. I've read some of the hands-on impressions. I've seen, at least I haven't watched every minute of the Treehouse stuff by any means, but I've seen some of it. So there was a fair amount of this that was like, yes, I've already seen this kind of covered elsewhere. And as a result of that, you're going to get a certain amount of people feeling, underwhelmed, right? It's just like kind of, okay, was this really warranted or whatever? And it's just like, well, I think they made their bed with that. You know what I mean? That's the trade-off, right? It's like, how many people do you want to watch it versus how sort of much of an impact do you think it can make? And it seems like they went for the eyeballs rather than, having everybody feel like they came away with a positive impression of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the calculus that went into it, because it does feel very much like there are big sections of this where they're not even necessarily describing Mario Kart World. They're just describing Mario Kart.
Yeah, just like the absolute fundamentals. Like, you can play as Mario, Luigi, Peach,
It's
Bowser.
like, brother, the last game sold 800 trillion copies. You can skip this part.
Yeah, it was kind of a relief when they only showed the new items, for instance. Okay.
But they didn't. They showed Bullet Bill.
Sure, no, but like in the that's true.
There's still a lot of old items.
Very quickly pivoted.
If you're going to take the time to say. If you're going to take the time to say you can play as Mario and Luigi, they could have said, and this is a green shell, and this is a red shell. I mean, they could have gone.
Yep. Let me explain what the green shell does versus the red shell. Look, here's a video showing the green shell going straight and the red shell tracking. Here's a blue shell. I wonder what it does. I like that the first time we did this direct, we came up.
That's the funny thing.
I know.
I wonder what this
part.
does.
I feel like the first time we did this segment, we came up with this like really smart second screen integration with the My Nintendo app, or Nintendo Today, which I keep calling My Nintendo. This time we're just making it a worse version of the direct it already was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just extrematize it. But
that's why it broke.
For me, there was some interesting nuggets to come out of it, which again, maybe if you've been more thorough in your consumption of the Treehouse stuff or hands-on impression, maybe it wouldn't have stuck out to you the same way. But definitely the kind of jumping stuff, I think, was the most, like, the thing that stuck out to me. The idea that, when you do the hop, that can execute a power slide. If you do it without kind of input in a particular left or right, direction, then what you do is actually charge up energy to do a bigger jump, and then you can use that to like get onto the grind. You do the rail grinding on particular bits of the environment, or indeed that what we've seen, again in stuff like the trailer that was in the Switch 2 Direct, where you could kind of go up and drive around like a wall, sort of a sheer kind of surface, and do, take shortcuts and kind of stuff like that, kind of stunt type stuff. That looks pretty interesting, and just in terms of the kind of broad applications that could have in all sorts of ways, both in terms of taking shortcuts, shaving seconds off time trial type of stuff, but then also this whole exploration angle that they're pushing naturally, with that being the principal kind of innovation of the game. So that looks, again, it's not wholly new. You kind of seen, bits of this being done, but actually understanding it, how it actually works and the kind of applications it could have. I thought that was one of the more like interesting parts.
Yeah, like they talked about what the P-switch buttons do and how it unlocks challenges, and like there was definitely stuff that they, like the photo mode they talked about. It's like, okay, you talked about this on the first direct. You can really skip this part.
Yeah.
But how you unlock new costumes by picking up food at the Yoshi. Like, are we really comfortable eating food prepared by Yoshi?
To be fair, it could just be a mascot. I mean, it's like,
It's true.
I haven't been to KFC lately, but I ain't expecting Colonel Sanders to actually prepare it.
Well, not unless you go to Japan, where he's there in every location as a statue staring at you in the doorway.
And there was the whole thing with the curse of the Colonel with the Hanshin Tigers, right? Like, it got thrown in the river or something, and then they didn't win the title for decades. But it's been broken. They did it, guys. It's over.
Maybe just the Hanshin Tigers were bad. Maybe that's the problem.
It doesn't always have to be an actual curse. It could just be stuff happens.
Maybe your owner just sucks.
Sometimes you could be good enough to win and you don't. As well.
Right.
There's that. It just doesn't happen. But everything doesn't have to be a curse. We don't have to look for Billy Goats, Black Cats, or Colonel Bloody Sanders.
Sometimes you're just owned by Jerry Reinsdorf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that maybe more accurately could be described as a curse.
Yeah, Greg, I think you're probably the most mentally healthy Bills fan I've met in that case, because
Oh well, there it is. It's
you could easily just say it's a curse.
For someone who is crippling,
saying that.
For someone who is cripplingly mentally ill, that is a disturbing prospect to consider.
Let's take it as you will. Take it as a compliment if you feel like it.
I met a Bills fan who has to wear a full suit as part of his job in his office, and one of his tables in his office is a collapsed table from a Bills game that he reassembled as a memento.
Yeah,
which means he had to drive that table from upstate New York because you can't put that on an airplane. He claimed the table,
commitment to the bit,
so that he could reassemble it. And it has logbooks on it.
The point is, yes, there are. It seems like the Yoshi drive-through stuff is not particular to that first level that they showed in the Switch 2 Direct, or indeed a little bit in the Switch 2 reveal. It's in multiple tracks, and it seems like if you find them and pick up an order through one of them, it unlocks cosmetics permanently. I guess it's not just like, oh, okay, well, you change for this race, and then that, like, it seems like then it's selectable as a possibly a discrete character slot on this massive yawning list of Mario Kart characters and variants that presumably originally came from Mario Kart Tour. It is, there may be rather a lot of them.
So we talked about how many characters there are and how really it's just costumes, but like and right now there's 12 menu pips you can go through, but there's nothing stopping them from putting more.
Yeah. They
could just do more.
Yeah. Well,
like this is an it's an $8 game.
13 pages, 12 slots per page, 156 slots of whatever that is. Individual characters, or cosmetic variants or whatever, but yeah.
A fucking cow.
Yeah.
Does Cow get costumes?
Not Moo Moo. Cow.
No, not Moo Moo. No, we've through the looking glass here, people. Moo Moo's lost its name.
Yep.
Does Cow get costumes? I need to know this. We made jokes about the stupid skeleton fish getting new hat. Like, it's entirely plausible it does get costumes how things are going here.
I assume so, just not as many. Yeah. It's like, like Peach and Daisy are going to have like a million costumes compared to Cow and Bones.
Why? Cow needs many more costumes than them.
Yeah, it's not like the Mario Kart franchise is all that concerned about parity or anything. Like Yoshi can ride a Yoshi bike and regular. Yeah. Is that the name? Can ride a regular bike, but you're not going to get a Mario-shaped vehicle, unfortunately. But I'd like you to picture it.
It should be the Super Mario Galaxy 2 reference, shouldn't it?
We talked about this on the show back when it was Super Mario the Kart, where you would just drive. Yeah. Their heads would turn into carts, but it was actually them transforming. And then again, I think I may have even made the reference that it was Kamek doing it, and then they just drive themselves around the course.
And so that's another thing. He sees that he's like an item now, and he does something but it wasn't that clear what he does.
It looks like just general fuckery. Because it can affect characters and it can affect items on the course and it can affect hazards.
You now have like basically the equivalent of the Tusken Raiders in the pod race, like non-player characters fucking with you from the outside. Like that was kind of interesting.
Good. Bring it. Bring all the chaos. I love it. I love this for me. Did you know that in battle modes you pop balloons? Because we have to talk about all the Mario Kart that there is to talk about.
Well, one thing that I did learn from...
What about Conquistador driving a car?
Yeah, because I hadn't watched any of the Treehouse stuff. One thing that I did learn from this was the whole tricks system and how basically you can platform your way to different shortcuts and platforms, and that's very cool. Like that will make the game very replayable for me, I feel. And, just figuring out what's the optimal way to get through a course. And just the very fact of, like, you can just ride on any wall for a bit and then, jump and, take different lines through the course is, pretty exciting. Like, it's not something that I expected from this game. And now you mentioned, Greg, in the previous recording that
you only live twice.
The time trials more interesting, and it would.
The other part of it is what is presumably as well is the P-switch thing that James mentioned. Like, I think they'd been spotted in media about bits of video, screenshots or whatever, but they kind of explicitly laid out the way that you hit one, it activates a little challenge where you get coins populate and you've got to be able to collect them in a set time limit or whatever. But that does seem like it'll be quite leveraged on that kind of like almost vehicle parkour thing. That's he's probably going to kind of find a way not just of leveraging those mechanics for some kind of an interesting challenge that you can find just by exploring this new open world, but maybe it'll also help to kind of teach you what you can do with this new kind of twist to the locomotion. I hope so. I hope that's kind of those sorts of things are quite good, where it's showing you something. It could be you could pick it up something up for a particular race from like a ghost, in a time trial setting. If you download friends times or best times or whatever. But this could work in a more general way, where it's like, okay, just helping you understand what is possible by having this particular challenge embedded in the open world that forces you to do something perhaps for the first time. The only thing that I felt was left a little bit kind of unsaid in that would have been helpful. It's just the idea of like, okay, you collect these like peach medallions or something for successfully completing such challenges. It would have been nice to have maybe at least a hint of what that connects to. Is it unlocking something? Is it some sort of like achievement-y kind of thing? Like, how does that... It would be good if it tied into some sort of broader incentive structure or, progression system, something. Right.
Right.
And I assume it will, but it's just they were kind of vague on that. It was just like, well, you get a medallion. And also, considering it's called Mario Kart World, I contend that it should, like Super Mario World, be a Yoshi coin rather than a Peach medallion. But that's just...
What if everybody has medallions and the progression system is just now you can find more medallions?
Maybe
I'm just too brain broken from Xenoblade X, where completing a quest reward is 9 more quests.
That's your reward.
The reward is go find this motherfucker's cat. Why? Because you found his dog. So obviously he lost a cat too. I do feel like, and just to kind of, I've alluded to the fact that we fixed the Nintendo Today app, which I finally got right. Just the idea of like, if they're going to present this thing to try to bring attention to it, Greg hit it on the nose that calling it a direct implies there's going to be, at least some kind of reveal. And there really wasn't anything. I mean, like, NWR has a write-up of what was in this direct. It's like 3 paragraphs long. there's not a ton to say. And so having some kind of like alternative communication path for this kind of information might have been set the right expectation. Because, one of the things, for better or worse, that has been a major topic of conversation about this game since the price was revealed is, why is it $80? Now, the real reason it's $80 is Nintendo thinks they can charge $80.
Yeah, it's their most popular game. Presumably, they've put quite a lot of development time and resources into it too. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what it'll be? Whether the market will bear it in the way that they're hoping is an entirely separate question. But as we mentioned last week, in terms of inflation, $80 is $60 from 2017. So there's that part of it. And also, it's worth mentioning, this is the most, the biggest step change in the level of complexity and therefore, costliness of game development that Nintendo has gone through since coming into the HD era back on Wii U, which is more than a decade ago.
Yeah, like, I want to be clear, I'm not necessarily critiquing it, but it was like, oh, well, maybe they're going to show something in the Direct that explains. Like, maybe they're going to show the fact
maybe
they're
going to show something in the Direct that makes you want to buy it more. Yeah, I mean, that would generally be what they'd go for, I imagine.
But, like, even then, we got the same information on online mode we had before. We got to find out that the camera supports up to 4 faces, which is great.
It seemed to be more of an opportunity to hope to make memeable moments, and they seem to have succeeded on a few fronts. Like people noticed, winks to past, entries in the franchise. Like at the very beginning of the presentation, you see like a side view of Donkey Kong throwing a banana peel at Yoshi, and that's the if you let Super Mario Kart play on the Super Nintendo, like that's the opening animation. So someone noticed that also, and I noticed this, and I think I wasn't the only one because everyone pointed this out. But the fact that they had the penguin go off a cliff, or like twice, it's almost as if like most people noticed the second time the cliff, but there was also like the first time that someone drops off the course, it's also the penguin. I feel like they must have been capturing footage for these meme moments, and they were like, okay, so we've got our one for the penguin. Wait, we can do better. So they shot a different thing, again. And then they were like, let's stick them both in there because
every shot should have had a penguin falling off a cliff somewhere in the background. Beyond that, like I said, if you saw the Treehouse Live stuff, a lot of this got covered, but not in the most timely manner. So if you wanted to get kind of like the brass tacks of what they talked about on the Treehouse Live stuff, this will get you there. Like it is only 15 minutes. Like that, in a certain sense that it's more of like a Mario Kart World digest. It is more useful in that respect. The grand innovation we had was that they should be dropping stuff on the Nintendo Today app as it's happening in the video. That was what we were talking about. Instead, today I get 2 Mario Sunshines and 2 things about the stupid elephant form. And that's 2 unrelated things about Sunshine and 2 unrelated elephant form things. And that's my Nintendo Today. Fucking what? What year is this? So, this could have been a YouTube video. This, to Guillaume's point earlier, this could have been an email. It was an email. I'm sure there was a PR email that I didn't get. But, yeah. Anything else anybody wants to mention on it? If not, that's a podcast.
Wrap it.
It's a podcast.
That's a podcast. Greg, what's our music for this week?
Well, naturally, of course, we wanted something for our retroactive game, the Dragon's Trap. And in this case, kind of ends up, I think, being unexpectedly extra fitting, given the nature of the name, because it's The Last Dungeon Encore. So basically, in the game, you have the fact that, as we already mentioned, you begin at the end of the previous game in the series, right? But not only do you have to sort of come out of that part of the game, but eventually you'll have the opportunity to revisit it. I don't think it's mandatory. It's just you can go there for better equipment, essentially. And this, again, because they've got the, kind of with the ability with the very much nicer instrumentation to kind of revisit that and give it a very different feel from what you had the first time. Much more triumphant and like, yes, you're coming back here now and you're just gonna, wreck everybody and get your cool armor back, essentially. And so, yeah, just had the nice kind of energy to finish on. I think that perhaps, we've ended up lacking as we've had to do our own encore of the Mario Kart segment.
All right. Well, on that, it is time for us to go. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That's one thing I noticed, actually, the music in the background. There was more references to non-Mario Kart games than is necessarily the case always with Mario Kart. In terms of there was a Yoshi story, kind of, obviously it's all in that now the sort of expected Mario.
Did I drop?
Okay, no.
No, I think it's just Greg.
Damn it. He got us again. I bet he's talking about us right now.
Talking about a curse right here.
Yeah. Well, I hope he's recording. We'll wrap up once he gets back. I'm guessing his battery might be...
Yeah, I have one... I did want to at least talk about the idea of trying to integrate this in other channels to try to get people interested in these kinds of non-direct things.
I'm going to delete Nintendo Today, by the way. I don't need this app.
So I just launched it for today because we've gone over to midnight. I have Super Mario short movies, which is just the trailer where they introduced Elephant Mario. I have one picture, a single picture of Breath of the Wild. I have Power-Ups Illustrated, also about Elephant Mario. So I now have 2 Elephant Mario contents on here. Bianco Hills from Super Mario Sunshine, and the cover of Super Mario Sunshine. I have 2 Mario Sunshine things, 2 things about the fucking elephant power-up, and a random drawing of Breath of the Wild. That is my Nintendo Today. Fuck that. Welcome back, Greg. Did you finish your thought?
Not entirely, no. But okay,
so I'll let you finish it as best you can because I can't remember where we were transitioning.
No, except well, the worst thing about it is without actually playing it back in full, it's a little unclear exactly to what point it gets. So because we had some of that problem last week as well, which is just part of why it's so bloody annoying. But yeah, I mean, look, it can get shorter.
Fair enough.